Life and Limb, The Toll of the American Civil War, an exhibit at the New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park, Fall 2015. More than 3 million soldiers fought in the war from 1861 to 1865. More than 500,000 died, and almost as many were wounded, but survived. Hundreds of thousands were permanently disabled by battlefield injuries or surgery, which saved lives by sacrificing limbs. These men served as a symbol of the fractured nation and remained a stark reminder of the costs of the conflict for long after the war. No tongue can tell, no mind conceive, no pen portray the horrible sights I witnessed. Recollections of a soldier wounded at Antietam, 1862. The horrors of war. Most soldiers, many of whom were as young as 18 when they reported for duty, were unprepared for the realities of wartime and the scale of the carnage. They were usually marshaled for service without training and often stationed miles from where they had grown up. Both sides had predicted a swift resolution to the conflict, and morale plummeted as the fighting dragged on. New technologies increased both the risk of injury and its severity. Rifled muskets fired further and more accurately than older weapons and could be quickly reloaded with the mini-ball, a bullet of soft lead invented in the 1840s. The ammunition caused extensive damage as it changed shape on impact, shattering 2 to 3 inches of bone and dragging skin and clothing into the wound. The degree of injury and risk of infection was a major cause of amputations. Soldiers were vulnerable to infectious diseases that spread rampantly in crowded camp conditions. In fact, yellow fever, smallpox, malaria, and other diseases took more lives than battlefield injuries. Among those who had not been previously exposed to them, childhood illnesses such as measles, mumps, and diphtheria became a serious threat. Some men never even saw combat, falling so ill as to require immediate hospital care. They perished or recovered alongside the rising number of wounded swelling the wards after every battle. Maimed men. The limbs of soldiers are in as much danger from the ardor of young surgeons as from the missiles of the enemy. Surgeon Julian John Chisholm, 1864. Although the exact number is not known, approximately 60,000 surgeries, about 3/4 of all the operations performed during the war, were amputations. Although seemingly drastic, the operation was intended to prevent deadly complications, such as gangrene. Often undertaken without anesthesia and sometimes leaving the patient with painful sensations in the severed nerves, the removal of limbs was widely feared by soldiers. Under the knife. The vast number of wounded men made it impossible for surgeons to undertake more delicate and time-consuming procedures, such as building splints for limbs or carefully removing only part of the broken bone or damaged flesh. Critics, like Confederate surgeon Julian John Chisholm, charged that inexperienced doctors were too eager to attempt amputation as a way to improve their skills and accused them of experimenting, often exacerbating existing injuries. Soldiers nicknamed such enthusiasts butchers, and some even went so far as to treat themselves to try to avoid the painful intervention of the surgeon. Limits of medicine. At this time, most physicians had a very limited understanding of the importance of sterilization and the risks of infection, and little practice treating the kind of major cases seen during the war. Some severe wounds, particularly those to the stomach, were usually fatal, so patients unlikely to recover were often left untreated. Injured soldiers often waited more than a day for medical care, and sometimes had to endure repeated procedures to remove infection or for hastily undertaken amputations to be properly finished. Private George W. Lemon was shot in the leg at the Battle of the Wilderness, Virginia on May 5, 1864. He was captured by Confederate soldiers and did not receive treatment for his injuries until he was freed by Union forces over a week later. For more than a year, he suffered repeated infections in the wound and poor health until surgeon Edwin Bentley amputated the limb. The soldier made a full recovery and was fitted with an artificial leg in 1868. Honorable scars. It is not 2 years since the sight of a person who had lost one of his lower limbs was an infrequent occurrence. Now, alas, there are few of us who have not a cripple among our friends, if not in our own families. Physician Oliver Wendell Holmes, 1863. The vast number of men disabled by the conflict were a major cause of concern for rebel and Union leaders. Some worried about preventing idleness and immoral behavior, while others focused on the economic hardship veterans would later face if they could not find employment after the war. Proposed solutions include wartime work as cooks, clerks, and hospital attendants, pensions and convalescent homes for those discharged from the Army because of their disability, and funds for the purchase of artificial limbs. Rebuilding the body. Almost 150 patents were issued for artificial limb designs between 1861 and 1873 as the industry expanded to accommodate the veteran population. In 1862, the federal government allocated Union veterans $75 to buy an artificial leg and $50 for an arm. And by 1864, the Confederacy was also providing financial assistance for such purchases. The payments usually covered the cost of the device and travel to a showroom for it to be fitted. The empty sleeve. One proud huzzah for the empty sleeve. The crutch, May 6, 1865. A large proportion of disabled veterans in both the North and the South did not wear artificial limbs. Many did not even apply for the money they were eligible to collect because of negative attitudes to the idea of charity. Moreover, pinning up an empty sleeve or trouser leg, instead of hiding the injury with a prosthesis, made their sacrifice visible. Displaying an honorable scar in this way, especially during and immediately after the war, helped amputees to assert their contribution to the cause. Sacrifices, forgotten. The selflessness of soldiers fostered great respect in the years after the war. Pension payments were increased regularly, and men pursuing political office often found that their obvious injury proved useful in attracting voters. Yet as Americans sought to put the memory of the conflict behind them, they increasingly ignored the plight of aging, disabled, impoverished veterans, instead memorializing the dead and asserting national patriotism became the focus of Civil War remembrances, and the image of the disabled soldier became one of a money-grabbing dependent. This exhibition was developed and produced by National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, curated by Manon Parry, Ph.D., exhibition designed by Riggs Ward Design. The website, www.nlm.nih.gov/life and limb.